Day 498 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Jozzy here, and today is another update as I take that simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses. And so currently, Russia is sitting on more than 232,000 military personnel losses. Then in terms of their hardware losses, 6 tanks, 16 APVs, and a whopping 22 artillery. But also with a staggering 9 air defense systems destroyed. Some of which are no doubt from delayed or catch-up information additions, as a result of the AFU continuing to make its counteroffensive engagements across multiple frontline axes on the map. Then, speaking of which, we'll head back to the map today and start out in Russia, as the rate at which mysteriously coincidental fires in Russia continue to occur on an almost daily basis now. And so this time it was at a tire factory up in St. Petersburg. And though it cannot be confirmed yet for the reason for this particular occurrence, the chances are genuinely that factories just like this one have been re-geared to or even mandated to assist with the Russian war efforts in Ukraine. And I hope I don't sound too conspiratorial when I say the following, that after everything I've seen and heard now, I just get this mental image in my head these days of the Russian mafia state just bullying privatized business owners in Russia into complying with the forced supply of military goods at the cost of the private owner's bankruptcy. Therefore, the owner simply decides to make an insurance job out of it, if you get what I mean. Then heading back down the map to Ukraine, so several caliber cruise missiles were launched from the Black Sea overnight, with a particular focus on the extremely western Ukraine city of Lviv, also in the oblast of the same name. Now, regional officials reported that at least 2 Russian cruise missiles struck a critical infrastructure target in the city in the early hours of the morning, causing damage to the windows of several nearby residential buildings. And Ukrainian air defenses or air defense batteries are also claimed to have shot down at least 1 or 2 of the missiles as they approached the city. And it really is a clear sign of how Ukraine needs to continue to receive air defense support from the partnering nations, making future attempts like these futile. And in many cases, or in many ways, they're already futile attempts for Russia to do so, as Russia was categorically unsuccessful in taking out Ukraine's energy infrastructure during those most critical winter months back around 6 months ago. Then heading to the Donbass, as the Bakhmut region has been busy on multiple fronts in the last day or two, with the AFU pushing flanks in the north, so pushing out Russian forces from several key strongholds near Berkivka, and I'll just pop open the not so up-to-date date map there, and you can see a bit of a push there, but it is certainly more pronounced that you can see with the current updates on the map. Then also, the AFU sneaking in a cheeky flag liberation video somewhere on the outskirts entry to Bakhmut itself. And a video like this may not seem that substantial, but it's actually very symbolically powerful and would certainly not seem minor to the Russian MOD or bunker boy Putin himself. Then just to the south of Bakhmut, the Ukrainian forces are gaining nearly, if not all, of the high ground at Klishchivka, thus severely putting the pressure on the Russian forces at this location at the moment. Oddly enough, just earlier to this, there were some Russian sources that claimed the settlement was already overrun by Ukrainian forces, but the AFU pretty much responded saying, nope, not yet, but we will. Then just heading down south for a hot second, so Ukrainian troops managed to liberate about 1 kilometers deep into Russian-occupied territory. This is south of Avdiivka, so you can see it here somewhat on the map there. Now, this is actually in addition to gains made here from the previous day as well, which means a real-time map would actually show something even a bit more substantial than this. Then, moving easterly, right next door at Mccar. So, Mccar's been getting hammered over the past 2 days by the armed forces of Ukraine, and as it was being visited by the Uncle HIMARS strikes. And twice in the past 48 hours, and done so on some pretty strategic Russian military assets. The first was an ammunition dump, of which you can see a whole bunch of secondary explosions from the unseen stored Russian munitions. Then the second was at a nearby oil depot, Russian oil depot, as Ukrainian forces are continuing to hit critical infrastructure of the Russian army in the occupied territories. And interestingly, the Russian-installed authorities of the region said about the oil dump that it was destroyed as a result of HIMARS missile debris, after Russian air defenses apparently shot down the HIMARS missile instead. So the HIMARS strike was still effective? Is that what they're getting at? And as unlikely as the Russian version of events is here, either way, it's classic Russian rhetoric trying to save face with zero class or tact. Which all reminds me again of the completely falsified daily reports that the Russian MOD receives from the frontliners, let's call them, all claiming that the Russian army is quite skillful at intercepting HIMARS munitions. Never mind the fact that the Russian army personnel are promised financial incentives for taking out a tank or a HIMARS missile, which obviously leads to more corruption in the army. But it's just erroneous situational awareness on the part of the Russian generals, the Ministry of Defense, that sort of thing, which is just yet another example of how poor military intelligence on Russia's part is causing Russia's invasion into Ukraine to take a lot longer than the originally Russian anticipated 3 to 7 days. Which therefore also gives a lot of credence to military analysts' suggestions that Russia has lost half of its entire combat capability in this failing invasion attempt of Ukraine. Oh, and just lastly for the ammo dump explosion, quite an interesting one here. So when you pause the video of the ammo dump explosion itself for just a split half a second, you can see in the fire what actually looks to be like an extremely intimidating mythical fire elemental beast that has consciously sought out this destruction. It's a real incredible freeze frame, that one. Then we'll head down to the southern axis. More specifically, we'll start out in the Velika Novasilca axis. So a little bit here, just between Zaporizhia and the Donetsk Oblast. So Pryutne, right here, is reportedly liberated under AFU control, but not yet visually confirmed. And the reason for that is it's likely due to the heavy shelling that continues up until now. Also, the AFU reportedly entered the outskirts of Staromyoska, so that location there, just below or south of Makarivka, and also adjacent to that and east of the river, the AFU is conducting recon on the outskirts of Urazane as well. And so Ukraine's counteroffensive in this region continues to show or output more and more examples of Russian hardware eliminations, including this Russian T90M, main battle tank, which was taken out by smart precision 155mm artillery munitions, like the Excalibur, similar to, but not exactly the same. Also, some other impressive examples in the last day or so include a Russian Mr. S SPG, big old gun on wheels, or trucks as I like to say, and a BM-21 Grad multiple rocket launcher system, with both of those last examples taken out by Ukrainian counter-battery fire. So for instance, a Ukrainian employed Cobra counter-battery radar, where it detects the Russian firing artillery, SPG for instance in this case, and locates that Russian position, then fires back to eliminate that firing source. And it's a very handy capability that I would say, surprisingly, Ukraine seems to use more often and uses much more effectively than its Russian counterpart in this war. And so I've got to say, one of the most fascinating and important stories that's happening right here, right now in Zaporizhia, is one that doesn't get a lot of press at all, which is that Russia's 58th Combined Arms Unit, army or corps of sorts, is defending heavily entrenched lines here in the south, which is problematic because it's basically its own army corps, normally designed to secure Russia's volatile Caucasus region. And by that, I mean anywhere in the south of Russia. So I'll move all the way here. So we're talking about the, let's call it the contested Georgian region, the Chechen Republic, Dagestan, all of these places that ideally would, if they had the military opportunity to, would probably release themselves from the Kremlin's control or tyranny. So it means this region is potentially left wide open to compromise. Truly a sign of Russia putting all of their eggs in this unwinnable Ukrainian basket. But it gets even worse than that, because around Velika Novasilca, the location I've just pointed to before, Russia's 5th Combined Arms Army and Naval Infantry hold the front here, who also are instead routinely based 7,000 kilometers away as a balance to Chinese power, all the way in the east of Russia. So in other words, Russia is leaving its own country's flanks open and heavily under-defended. It's a pure long-term recipe for disaster. So Russia's Chechen Republic might want to become fully autonomous again. Georgia might want to take back its lands, and China, don't even get me started on China's hunger or taste for land grabs. So it's an extremely precarious situation for Russia to put itself in. And it's just super odd because they're really going all in on this war in Ukraine, all at the cost of their very own national security. Just bananas. Then we'll move across to some news for today. So in another Russian hardware update, so let's see what they've been adding to their arsenal in the last 24 hours, shall we? So the transport of T55 tanks was spotted near Voronezh in Russia, headed towards Ukraine. And for those of you that don't know, the 55 in T55 roughly equates to their production year. Yep, that's right, 1955, 70-year-old Soviet garbage. Unmaintained, rusted out components, gearboxes that have severely limited functionality, clogged up fuel lines, worn out spring suspensions, no night optics upgrades, worn out barrels, and this is all just from the top of my head from previous reports of Russia using them in the field, with Russian tankies themselves calling these ancient monstrosities just garbage. In fact, I think it was just last week, Russia had one that was in such a state of disrepair that they simply filled it up with, to the brim with TNT, I think 6 tons worth from memory, then put it in drive, shooting it of sorts directly into Ukrainian frontline positions. Except it was going so painfully slow that Ukraine or a Ukrainian soldier clearly saw it and whipped out the RPG and blew it away to smithereens. There was explosions, shockwaves, and everything in that video. So this is the utterly embarrassing desperation that Russia is going through to keep the war going, using older and older hardware until they run out. It's going to be that simple. I'm still quite sure of this. That is to say, Russia is going to run out of some sort of a key military component that would otherwise keep their war machine going. And so time is really not Russia's friend in this war. Then in some other news, Italy has frozen Russian oligarchs' assets worth $2.5 billion. This is in US dollars recently. In fact, this is happening in many countries all around the world at the moment. Unfortunately, there's some legal barriers currently to sending that money to Ukraine to assist in the rebuilding of their country. However, there are some creative international lawmakers already on the case looking to figure out how to reappropriate these funds whilst still respecting international law. Then in a final funny to round it all off today, guys, so Wagner boss and recent Russian mutiny leader, Prigozhin, had his mansion raided today in Russia. And as you can see, he was living good, but not as good as Putin. And just look at how these Russian security forces, this raid unit, love filming themselves rushing in, all tactically equipped and heroically demonstrating force and organization. I just want to say, bro, it's an empty building. And hey, I get it, the government raids of this magnitude are filmed, but the fact that they released the footage straight away is just another desperate attempt of Russia trying to promote this image of strength, this completely fake and fraudulent image of strength. For a country, no less, that almost lost themselves to civil war just last weekend. But back to Prigozhin, so first they exile him to Belarus, surprisingly with amnesty, then they prohibit him from continuing his Wagner recruitment centers, then they take away his troll farm in St. Petersburg, then they take away his catering business contract with the Russian military, indeed he was a chef, and now they're raiding his empty mansion. They even swiped his private helicopter too. There it is, flying away into the sunset. So for a guy they gave amnesty to for mutiny, it's almost like a hypocritical series of events playing out right here, right now. But we actually call that Russian logic now, don't we? And so anyway, they also found some cash, some passports, and this little hilarious chestnut of a find. So the security forces also appeared to have leaked Prigozhin's disguises. Now, remembering Prigozhin is quite hairless all over his face, so naturally every disguise here includes a hairpiece or two, top or bottom. But only a complete narcissist would take pictures of their own disguises. I mean, also, you risk giving authorities a reference guide to how you might actually look when you're in disguise, so that's just dumb. But I've got to say, that top middle picture, he looks at least 10 years younger with all that hair. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm back around, so I had my sleep, feeling lots better. And please leave a like, a comment, subscribe if not already. Always helps boost out the channel a bit. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.